I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for people with ADHD to engage in pleasurable tasks on a regular basis. But it is also incredibly hard for people with ADHD to actually do things that they want to do that would bring them enjoyment. For ADHDers, not engaging in things that bring you pleasure becomes a downward spiral into a pit. Because if you're not engaging in things that make you happy, that boost dopamine, it becomes harder to initiate tasks and it becomes harder to actually engage in the things that bring you pleasure. And so the more that we don't do pleasurable things and the harder that it gets and the less we include those stuff in our life, the more likely it is that you're going to fall into burnout. And when that happens, the challenge is that people with ADHD become completely blocked out from engaging in anything pleasurable. It requires dopamine to feel motivated enough to do the things that make you feel happy, but you're not happy because you're burnt out and you don't have the dopamine to do the thing that makes you feel happy. The reason why this is important for me to talk about as a registered dietitian is that what happens when people get into this state is that the source of pleasure that they turn to for everything, for emotional regulation, for stimulatory regulation, just to feel good for a second, is food. And the reason why people turn to food is that it is the easiest and most accessible way to boost dopamine and to get pleasure, and it doesn't require executive function. In fact, the less executive function you use, probably the more pleasurable that food is. And so if somebody does have a challenging relationship with food and they feel like they don't have impulse control and they're struggling maybe with binge eating, you got to figure out a way to bring other sources of pleasure back into your life, which can feel really hard because you don't have energy. And so I would encourage people to start small. Start with little teeny tiny tasks or little teeny tiny quests on days when you don't have as much going on, and don't hold yourself to a really big standard, right? So let's say that you used to draw and you really like to draw. Don't set the goal that you're going to go draw for an hour. Just say, I'm going to doodle for 10 minutes. Or you can focus on creature comforts, right? How can you increase body pleasure? Once you've been doing those things for a while, you may be able to have a little bit more room to do things that are a little bit bigger. The other thing that can be really helpful is body doubling. And the last thing that can be helpful is to use food strategically, actually. I think for a lot of people who end up having a really heavy reliance on food, ultimately they want their relationship with food to be one where they never use it for emotional regulation, stimulatory regulation, or anything like that. But honestly, if you're being blocked out of pleasure right now and that's your only source of pleasure, can we use food to help you boost dopamine? To help you initiate a task that will actually bring you pleasure, because ultimately engaging in that task and getting back into the practice of it and building that muscle for doing fun things is going to help you get out of your dopamine drought. And the more you can do those things, the less you're going to feel like you need food. I hope that made sense. Anyway.